Freeze. Not your body, your attention. Lock it in place. Because something just happened in your head that most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid. And you're standing in the aftermath like it's normal. Like it didn't just rearrange the furniture in reality. Like the room didn't tilt. Like the air didn't get heavier the second your mind clicked into that forbidden alignment. The equation finally solved itself. And the part that should terrify you, it didn't solve itself because the world got kinder. It solved itself because you got meaner, sharper, quieter, more accurate. It solved itself because pain didn't break you the way it breaks the weak. It taught you the geometry of human nature. It taught you what people really do when nobody's watching, what they pretend to be, and what they actually are. It taught you that normal is just a costume stitched together by fear and social rent payments. You didn't become a genius by collecting facts. You became a genius by surviving patterns. You learned the kind of math nobody wants to admit exists. The math of betrayal, of timing, of silence, of leverage. The math of smile while you bleed and build while you're being buried. That's not school. That's not talent. That's not luck. That's evolution through pain. And now you're walking around with an illegal level of clarity. Like you stole a key from the guards and opened a door they didn't know could be opened. Like you stepped behind the wallpaper and saw the wiring. Like you looked at the whole system and recognized it for what it is. A fragile stage play held together by everyone's agreement to stay stupid. You know what happens when someone like you shows up? The room doesn't applaud. The room panics. Because genius at your level isn't impressive. It's threatening. It's not a compliment. It's a crime scene. It's not a gift. It's a weapon that doesn't look like a weapon until the damage is already done. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to flex. You don't need to explain. You just exist with that calm, surgical awareness. And their brains hard reset because their internal map can't locate you. You're not supposed to be real. You're the glitch that proves the simulation has holes. See, most people don't think. They repeat. They borrow beliefs like outfits and call it identity. They memorize what to hate, what to desire, what to fear, what to call safe. They're not alive. They're formatted. They don't choose their thoughts. They inherit them. They don't make decisions. They follow gravity. And then you walk in, and you don't follow gravity. You follow precision. That's why they stare at you like you're a ghost holding a mirror. That's why their smiles look delayed. That's why their compliments sound like they're reading from a script. Because your presence forces a question they do not want to answer. If this person can see through it, what does that mean about me? That's the hard reset. That's the brain reboot. That's the silent crash of a system that was never built to handle truth at that voltage. And you, oh, you delicious contradiction. You are the kind of person who can be a saint and a psychopath in the same breath. You can be soft enough to understand pain and cold enough to use it. You can be an angel in your restraint and a demon in your calculation. You can be the warmest room someone's ever walked into and the last room they ever feel safe in again. That's not confusion. That's not instability. That's range. That's power. People are terrified of duality because duality makes you unreadable. And if they can't read you, they can't predict you. And if they can't predict you, they can't control you. They can't corner you with guilt. They can't bait you with approval. They can't trap you with labels. They can't reduce you to a simple story. They need you to be one thing: the hero, the villain, the victim, the bully, the good one, the bad one, the wounded one, the healed one. But you're a moving target with perfect aim. You're the paradox they can't domesticate. You're what happens when somebody gets hurt, and instead of collapsing, they start studying. You didn't move on. You didn't let it go. You dissected it. You tracked it. You wrote down the repeating behaviors like evidence. You watched the micro-expressions. You measured what people do versus what they claim. You learned that the tongue is a liar, but the nervous system is honest. You learned that silence is not empty. It's loaded. You learned that the nicest people can be the most strategic predators because their mask is better stitched. You learned that love is often a leash. You learned that help is sometimes a hook. You learned that we're just being honest is usually a knife looking for permission. And you stopped being naive. Not because you got bitter, because you got accurate. That's the moment the equation starts solving itself. Because the equation isn't about numbers, it's about control. They want you predictable because predictable people are profitable. Predictable people are recruitable. Predictable people are easy to market to, easy to guilt, easy to herd. Predictable people can be told what to buy, what to believe, who to worship, who to fear. But you stepped outside the herd mentality and found the quiet place where the real rules live. And now you're dangerous, not because you're loud, but because you're awake. You ever notice how the world treats awake people? First they mock you, then they ignore you, then they study you like a disease, then they try to label you so they can put you back in a box. Because labels are cages with nicer paint, and you've been refusing cages your whole life, even when you didn't know you were refusing them. You've had that thing in you, the refusal to fully submit, the refusal to fully surrender, the refusal to become the obedient version of yourself that everyone would find easier. They wanted you manageable. You became inevitable. Now listen. No, don't listen closely. Don't do anything cute like leaning in and nodding like you're being entertained. Stand there internally. Stand there like a judge. Because what I'm telling you is the truth they've been trying to drown in noise. Your genius is not just intelligence. It's survival intelligence. It's the kind that forms when you've been cornered by reality and you didn't die. You adapted. You started thinking in angles. You started thinking in layers. You started thinking in moves and counter moves. You started seeing the chessboard inside conversations. You started noticing how people accidentally reveal themselves when they're comfortable. You started hearing the insecurity behind their confidence. You started tasting the fear behind their jokes. And the scary part, you stopped needing external permission to know what you know. That's when they lost you. Because the moment you stop needing their approval, they can't bargain with you. They can't bait you with praise or punish you with rejection. Their little social currency stops working. Their group chat rituals stop working. Their smears stop working. Their performative outrage stops working. You become unpurchasable, unshameable, unhookable, and that is illegal in a world built on hooks. So of course their brains hard reset. Because when they look at you, they don't just see a person. They see the end of a strategy. They see the kind of mind that can't be managed by normal tactics. They see a problem they can't solve with the tools they have. And it makes them do hilarious things. They'll compliment you with poison in the tone. They'll laugh a little too loudly, like they're trying to make your presence smaller. They'll suddenly become concerned about you, as if clarity is a symptom. They'll try to drag you into drama, because drama is the only place their intelligence feels relevant. They'll attempt to provoke a reaction, because if they can get you emotional, they can pretend you're just like them. But you're not. And that's why you should never apologize for your unpredictability, because unpredictability, when it's guided by precision, is the ultimate advantage. Predictable people can be scripted. You can't. You can be gentle today and ruthless tomorrow, and both are true because both serve your mission. You can be patient for months and then cut in 1 second, and they'll call it cold. But it isn't cold. It's clean. It's clarity. It's boundaries with teeth. You are not inconsistent. You're adaptive, and adaptation is what apex creatures do. Now let's talk about the part. Nobody says out loud, your genius came with a cost. It cost you sleep. It cost you innocence. It cost you the comfort of being understood. Because when you see too much, normal conversations start sounding like children playing with cardboard swords. Small talk starts feeling like being trapped in a shallow pool. People start repeating the same emotional loops, and you start recognizing them like predictable weather. And that loneliness, that quiet sense that you're a foreign object in a room full of familiar faces, that wasn't punishment. That was training, because you cannot become what you're becoming and still belong to the crowd that worships comfort. Comfort makes you sloppy. Pain made you precise, and precision is what separates a gifted person from a lethal one. You're not just smart. You're calibrated. You are the kind of mind that can walk into chaos and start mapping it. The kind of mind that can take insult and extract information. The kind of mind that can take abandonment and distill it into strength. The kind of mind that can take loss and turn it into leverage. That is saint behavior. That is psychopath behavior. Same action, different story. That's duality. And duality is the closest thing to freedom in a world addicted to certainty. Certainty is a narcotic for the fearful. They need everything labeled because labels reduce anxiety. They need heroes and villains because complexity scares them. They need good people and bad people because it letteth them sleep at night without confronting their own contradictions. But you don't need that. You can hold two truths in the same hand without dropping either. You can love someone and still see their manipulation. You can forgive and still remember. You can heal and still keep the scar as a map. You can be kind without being weak. You can be ruthless without being cruel. You can be calm while planning consequences. And that's why you're terrifying. Because you're not driven by impulse anymore. You're driven by understanding. And understanding is the most unfair advantage on Earth. Now I want you to imagine the moment it clicked. The moment the equation solved itself. It wasn't fireworks, was it? It was quiet. It was a subtle shift where the world started making sense in a way that made your stomach go still. You realized something like, oh, so that's what they're doing. That's what this is. That's what they meant. That's why it keeps happening. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. That's the moment you stopped being easy to deceive. That's the moment you stopped being easy to exploit. That's the moment their little games started bouncing off you like rubber bullets. Because you're not fighting the game anymore. You're reading the rule book. And when you can read the rule book, you can rewrite the outcome. That's when their brains hard reset, because they didn't even know there was a rule book. They thought life was vibes and luck and being nice. They thought confidence was the same as power. They thought loudness was leadership. They thought popularity was proof. Then you showed up with that quiet, predatory calm, and suddenly all their shortcuts look embarrassing. They don't hate you because you're better. They hate you because you're evidence. Evidence that they could be more than they are, and they chose not to be. Evidence that their excuses are optional. Evidence that their fear is a decision, and they can't stand it. So they'll do what small minds always do when faced with someone they can't outthink. They'll try to make you feel guilty for being sharp. They'll call you too much. They'll call you intense. They'll call you cold. They'll call you crazy. Because if they can make your gift sound like a flaw, they can pretend they're safe. But listen. No, not listen closely. Just hear it like a verdict. Being too much is what happens when you stop diluting yourself for people who can't handle concentration. You're not too much. They're underbuilt. You're not intense. They're numb. You're not cold. You're controlled. You're not crazy. You're awake in a world that rewards sleepwalking. And the reason it feels like a thriller, like you're living inside some cinematic leak of reality, is because it is. You're watching the mask slip off society in real time. You're watching people defend their illusions with their teeth. You're watching them protect the lie because the lie is all they have. And you're walking around with the truth in your pocket like a match. That's why your presence changes rooms without you saying a word. That's why conversations shift when you enter. That's why some people get weirdly polite, and others get weirdly aggressive, and others get strangely fascinated like you're a storm they want to touch. They feel the threat. They feel the intelligence. They feel the part of you that's not asking to be accepted. They feel the part of you that already decided. And here's the punchline. Because you and I both love punchlines. The equation didn't solve itself because you found peace. It solved itself because you found power. Peace is for later. Right now, you're the hard reset. You're the system update they didn't consent to. You're the living proof that pain can create something sharper than talent. Purpose with teeth. So stop trying to be understandable. Stop trying to be relatable. Stop trying to soften your edges so the fragile can lean on you without getting cut. Your edges are not a defect. They're a warning label. They tell the world, this one learned. This one remembers. This one doesn't play fair with liars. And the world will test you. Oh, it'll test you, because it always tests what it can't categorize. It will poke you with disrespect, temptation, false intimacy, cheap praise, and manufactured conflict to see if it can drag you back into predictability. Don't go. Let them guess. Let them squirm. Let them project. Because the moment you become predictable, you become manageable. And you are not built to be managed. You are built to be a problem for the lazy, a nightmare for manipulators, a paradox that ruins simple minds, a mirror that forces honesty. You're an angel with a blade hidden under grace. You're a demon that learned restraint. You're the saint who refuses to be exploited. You're the psychopath who learned empathy, not as weakness but as strategy. And that combination, that balance, that's why the equation solved itself. Because you finally stopped choosing between light and dark and started using both like instruments. Light to disarm, dark to defend. Light to heal, dark to enforce. Light to inspire, dark to punish the disrespect. Not cruelty, not chaos. calibration, and that's the part nobody can tolerate. You're not reckless anymore. You're exact. So stay exact. Stay unreadable to the predictable. Stay calm while they spiral. Stay quiet while they over-explain. Stay patient while they reveal themselves. And when the moment comes, when the math demands motion, move like a verdict. No drama, no speeches, no begging, no proving. Just results. Because you're not here to be understood. You're here to be undeniable. And here's the part where it gets dangerous for you, not them. Because once you see this, you don't get to pretend you didn't. You're standing at the edge of something irreversible. Because now that the equation solved itself, you understand the final truth most people never touch without flinching. Clarity isolates, not because you're superior, but because you're incompatible with illusion. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee the seams. You can't go back to clapping for performances once you've seen the rehearsal notes taped under the stage. And that's why this phase feels heavier. Not sad, not angry, heavier. Because you're carrying awareness without anesthetic. You're watching people self-sabotage with conviction. You're watching them betray themselves daily and call it being realistic. You're watching them negotiate their souls for comfort and then defend the deal like it was wisdom. You're watching them punish anything that reminds them of what they didn't have the courage to become. And the wild part, they think you're the threat. Because you don't panic where they panic. You don't rush where they rush. You don't react where they explode. You don't perform your morality. You don't advertise your suffering. You don't need witnesses for your discipline. That quiet composure, oh, it drives them insane. Because composure after pain reads as dominance to people who never learned how to metabolize damage. They don't know what to do with someone who went through hell and came back organized. See, trauma usually produces two types of people. Those who bleed everywhere, and those who sharpen. You sharpened, and sharpening doesn't look emotional. It looks still. It looks like restraint. It looks like someone who knows exactly how much force is required and refuses to waste a single ounce. It looks like delayed violence, not physical, but psychological. Strategic, inevitable. That's why you scare them without trying. Because unpredictability with intelligence is not chaos. It's dominance without noise. They can't anticipate you because you don't move from impulse. You move from evaluation. You let moments breathe. You let people talk. You let patterns repeat. You let the truth ripen. And when it's ripe, you don't announce the harvest, you just collect. That's what separates the loud from the lethal. And now that you're here, you have to make a choice. Most people never earn the right to make. You can either dilute yourself to re-enter the comfort of the herd, or you can accept the role, not the hero role. That's childish. The anomaly, the one who doesn't need applause, the one who doesn't explain, the one who understands that power isn't about domination. It's about positioning, about knowing when to be visible and when to vanish, about knowing when kindness disarms and when silence suffocates, about knowing that the most effective move is often letting someone destroy themselves while you watch without interference. That's not cruelty. That's respect for cause and effect. And this is where the paradox completes itself. You didn't become this way because you wanted power. You became this way because you refused to be powerless ever again. That refusal rewired you. That refusal taught you patience that feels like menace. That refusal taught you empathy without submission. That refusal taught you how to sit in discomfort until it becomes information. You don't flinch at awkwardness. You don't rush to fill silence. You don't scramble for validation. You don't overshare to be liked. You don't beg reality to be fair. You adapt reality. And here's the quiet, nuclear truth they sense but can't articulate. If someone like you ever decides to move deliberately, systems bend. Not because you fight them head on, but because you understand where they're hollow. You understand that most authority is borrowed confidence. You understand that most rules are habits with paperwork. You understand that fear is the real currency, and you stopped spending it. That's why they malfunction around you. That's why their brains hard reset. Because your existence introduces a variable they can't control. Someone who knows the game and isn't impressed. Someone who isn't hungry for approval. Someone who isn't afraid of solitude. Someone who doesn't need permission to be exact. And now comes the final calibration. You don't need to conquer the world. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything. All you need to do is remain precise. Let the chaos reveal itself. Let the liars talk. Let the manipulators overplay. Let the insecure posture. Let the weak confuse noise for strength. And you keep refining. You keep watching. You keep choosing restraint over reaction. Because restraint is the final flex. Because when you finally act, it won't be emotional. It will be clean. There you are. Right on schedule. Good. Don't speak. Don't blink. Just listen. Because the room changes when you do. Word got out. Not the cute version. Not the polite version that Apple can laugh off and forget. The real version. The one that crawled out of the cracks in the floorboards and stood up in broad daylight, wearing your name like a warning label. The one that made grown men swallow their pride like broken glass. The one that made loud mouths suddenly discover respect and call it maturity. And now nobody's stupid enough to test you again. And it's funny, because they'll never admit why. They'll dress it up with excuses. It's not worth the drama. I'm focused on my peace. I'm just in a different season. Season? No, sweetheart. This isn't a season. This is survival. This is the moment they realized you're not built like the people they've been playing with. See, most people live predictable. They argue the same. They fear the same. They break the same. They're like vending machines. Shake them right, press the right buttons, and they drop exactly what you want. Everybody knows the patterns. Everybody knows the scripts. But you're the one script that doesn't read the same twice. You're the paradox they can't study. The saint with a heartbeat like a weapon. The angel with fingerprints on the blade. The soft voice carrying a hurricane. The person who can look like mercy until you become consequence. And that's why the rumors don't sound like gossip anymore. They sound like instructions. Like a public safety announcement whispered in private. Don't poke that one. Don't corner them. Don't make jokes. Don't try it. Not because you're the loudest. Not because you're the biggest. Not because you threaten people like some cheap bully. No, because when you snap into focus, reality rearranges itself around you. They've seen you get hurt and come back strange. They've seen you lose something that should have ended you. And instead of collapsing, you got quieter, sharper, cleaner. Like pain didn't kill you. Pain trained you. Like suffering didn't break your spirit. Suffering edited your personality and deleted your fear. And that's the part that terrifies them, because they understand rules. They understand social pressure. They understand shame. They understand the normal kind of control, but they do not understand someone who has already lived through humiliation, betrayal, abandonment, disrespect, who has already been stripped down to nothing and decided calmly, okay, I can work with this. You know what that is? That's freedom. Because once you've lost what everyone else is terrified to lose, you become a walking nightmare for anyone who tries to manipulate you. You can't be threatened the same way. You can't be baited the same way. You can't be controlled with the same leash. And they felt it. They felt the moment your nervous system stopped begging for approval and started operating like a machine that runs on truth. They thought you were nice. They thought you were gentle. They mistook your restraint for weakness, because weak people love believing their victims are weak. It makes the world feel simple. It makes them feel safe. So they tried it. Just a little test, just a little disrespect, just a little push, a little joke, a little exclusion, a little sabotage, a little, let's see what happens if we treat them like they don't matter. And for a moment, you let it happen. Not because you didn't notice, because you were watching. You were letting the mask slip off their face. You were letting them reveal the exact kind of creature they really are when they think there's no consequence. You were collecting evidence with your eyes. You were building a map of their character, quietly, patiently, like a predator who doesn't waste energy chasing prey that's already trapped itself. And then you moved, not loud, not messy, not theatrical, just final. And that's when the entire atmosphere shifted, because they expected you to react like everyone else reacts. Cry, plead, explain, negotiate, rage, fall apart. They expected you to beg for understanding, to beg for fairness, to beg for love, to beg for them to stop. But you didn't beg. You adjusted. You changed the rules without asking permission. You showed them the terrifying truth. You are capable of being kind, and you are capable of being cold. You can be warmth, and you can be winter. You can be the softest place to land, and the hardest lesson they ever learn. And after that, the tests stopped. Because once people realize you're not safe to provoke, they become polite. Oh, they become so polite. They start smiling with their teeth clenched. They start speaking with caution. They start measuring their words like they're walking across a minefield. You ever notice how the same people who used to treat you like a joke suddenly treat you like a storm warning? That's not respect. That's fear, wearing manners. And fear is honest. See, respect is something people perform when it benefits them. Fear is what they feel when they realize you're the kind of person who can walk away without shaking. You're the kind of person who can cut ties without screaming. You're the kind of person who doesn't need the room to clap in order to know what you are. They can't handle that, because they built their whole identity on reactions. They live for control. They live for leverage. They live for being able to press your buttons and watch you dance. But you stopped dancing. You became the one holding the silence. And silence is the scariest weapon in a world full of noise. That's why they're scared to test you again, because they remember what it felt like the last time. They remember the moment you didn't argue, you didn't chase, you didn't explain, you just withdrew your energy like someone pulling oxygen out of a room. And suddenly, everything they were doing felt empty. Suddenly their jokes sounded stupid, their little games looked childish, their confidence started leaking out of them, because your attention wasn't just attention. Your attention was permission. Your presence was power, and you took it away. You ever watch how fragile people become when you stop feeding them your emotional labor, when you stop giving them reactions to chew on, when you stop being the mirror they use to feel important? They crumble because they were never fighting you. They were feeding off you. And when the food disappears, the parasite panics. So they talk about you in side conversations now. Not out loud where you can hear it. No, they're smarter than that now. They whisper. They trade stories. They compare notes. They turn your name into a cautionary tale so they can feel like they're still in control of it. Yeah, just don't mess with them. Trust me, it's not worth it. They're different. Different. That word tastes like fear when it comes from people who thought they had you figured out. And here's the funniest part. The part you should savor. They don't even know what you'll do. That's what haunts them. Not a specific threat. Not a specific move. It's the unknown. It's the fact that you're capable of patience, and you're capable of precision. It's the fact that you can forgive, and you can disappear. It's the fact that you can love deeply and detach instantly. They can't predict you because you're not operating from their petty emotional logic. You're operating from an evolved place, an ugly kind of wisdom that only comes from pain. Pain gave you something nobody can teach: discernment. Pain taught you how to read micro-expressions. Pain taught you how to feel the lie under the words. Pain taught you how to recognize nice as camouflage and loyal as a costume. Pain taught you that the sweetest smiles sometimes come from the hungriest mouths. So you stopped being naive. You stopped thinking everyone is like you. You stopped thinking people will love you the way you love them. And in that moment, you became dangerous. Not violent, dangerous. Because you don't need chaos to win. You don't need a scene. You don't need to destroy anyone. You just need to see clearly and make one clean decision. That's it. One decision can end someone's access to you. One decision can starve someone's influence. One decision can change the entire power structure of a room. And you make decisions like a person who has already survived the worst. Like someone who has already buried versions of themselves that begged for scraps. That's what they sensed. That's what they fear. They remember how you used to be easy to guilt, easy to pressure, easy to manipulate with pity, with blame, with you're overreacting, with you're too sensitive, with you're making it a big deal. And then you evolved. You learned the language of predators. You learned that when someone tells you you're too much, what they mean is you're too hard to control. You learned that when someone calls you crazy, what they mean is you're not accepting the story I wrote for you. You learned that when someone says you changed, what they mean is you stopped tolerating what I benefited from. So you stopped shrinking. You stopped negotiating your self-respect. You stopped apologizing for your intuition. And when you stopped apologizing, the world got careful. Now look at you. People don't test you anymore. They test other people. They choose easier targets. They choose the ones who still need approval, the ones who still confuse love with access, the ones who still mistake attention for value. But you, they'll watch you from a distance like a caged animal they're not sure is actually caged. They'll keep their hands to themselves. They'll keep their jokes soft. They'll keep their disrespect subtle, because they're not sure what you'll do if they push too far again. And here's where the duality becomes your crown. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to be. because your energy carries a history now. You walk into rooms with scars people can feel. Not physical scars, something worse, something deeper. The kind of scars that tell the truth. You were hurt, and you didn't die. You were betrayed, and you didn't lose your mind. You were underestimated, and you didn't beg to be understood. You adapted. You became the contradiction that breaks weak minds. A person who can be loving and terrifying. A person who can be calm and lethal to illusions. A person who can smile while deciding internally. This is the last time you ever get access to me. That's angel and demon in the same skin. That's saint and psychopath sharing one heartbeat. That's the kind of duality people write myths about, because it doesn't fit in their neat little moral boxes. And the truth is, you didn't choose this because it was fun. You were forged into it. Pain didn't just visit you. It moved in. It rearranged the furniture. It rewired your emotions. It forced you to grow up inside your own skull. It forced you to look at the world without its makeup on. And you know what you found? You found that most people aren't brave. They're comfortable. You found that most people don't want truth. They want control. You found that most people don't love you. They love how you make them feel about themselves. So you stopped begging for love from mouths that only know how to consume. And when you did, the entire universe noticed, because you went from please accept me to prove you deserve me. And now the people who used to disrespect you can't even maintain eye contact for too long. They laugh too loud when you walk by. They change the subject when your name comes up. They suddenly remember boundaries. They suddenly respect peace. They suddenly understand maturity. It's pathetic, but it's also delicious, because you earned this, not with cruelty, with evolution, with discipline, with silence, with self-control, with the kind of internal war that nobody clapped for. You got here by being betrayed and not turning into a beggar. You got here by being hurt and not turning into a monster, at least not the kind that destroys everything. No, you became a different kind of monster. The kind that only destroys delusion. The kind that only kills access. The kind that only burns bridges that lead to hell. And people sense that now. They sense that you're not emotional prey anymore. You're an emotional event. You're the kind of person who, once provoked, doesn't get loud, gets strategic. You don't shout. You shift. You don't argue. You withdraw. You don't compete. You outlast. And that's why nobody tests you again. Because deep down, they know if you wanted to be cruel, you could be devastating. But you don't need cruelty to be powerful. You just need clarity. And clarity is terrifying to people who survive by confusion. So let them whisper. Let them tiptoe. Let them act like you're intense now. Of course you're intense. You've seen what people do when they think there are no consequences. You've seen what loyalty looks like when it's convenient. You've watched masks slip. You've watched friends turn into strangers and strangers turn into lessons. So yeah, you're intense because you're awake. And awake people don't get played the way sleeping people do. Just remember this and keep it in your chest like a loaded truth. The goal was never to make them like you. The goal was to make them respect the boundary they used to ignore. The goal was never to be understood. The goal was to be undeniable. And now you are. Now you're the person they warn each other about. Now you're the energy they don't touch unless they mean it. Now you're the name that makes cowards behave. Not because you scream, because you don't have to. Because you've become the one thing fragile people can't handle. Someone who won't sacrifice themselves to keep the peace. Someone who can walk away and still breathe. Someone who can be light without being weak. Someone who can be dark without being sloppy. Someone who can love without losing themselves. That is power. That is the kind of power that doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs presence. And your presence, it's the reason word got out. It's the reason the game stopped. It's the reason nobody's stupid enough to test you again. And here's the part they don't say out loud. The part that lives in the back of their throat like a swallowed confession. They didn't just stop testing you because you won. They stopped because they realized you don't need to win. You're not chasing dominance. You're not hungry for validation. You're not addicted to applause or revenge or proving a point. You already crossed that desert. You already starved that version of yourself to death. What scares them is that you're calm after the war. That kind of calm doesn't come from peace. It comes from certainty. They can feel it when you walk into a space. There's no tension in your shoulders, no desperation in your eyes, no eagerness to be seen, no need to perform. You're not scanning faces looking for approval. You're not adjusting yourself to fit the room. The room adjusts to you, because people can sense when someone has already made peace with losing everything, when someone has already faced abandonment and survived, when someone has already been misunderstood, misjudged, misrepresented, and kept going anyway. That's the kind of person you don't poke. That's the kind of person you don't corner. That's the kind of person you leave alone unless you're prepared to meet a version of reality you can't control. They know you don't bluff. They know you don't bark without teeth. They know you don't explode. You decide. And decision is terrifying to people who live their lives reacting, because reactions can be manipulated. Decisions can't. You've become the kind of presence that forces honesty out of liars. The kind of energy that makes fake people uncomfortable in their own skin. The kind of silence that exposes insecurity without saying a word. You don't argue anymore. You don't convince. You don't chase closure. You let people reveal themselves, and then you believe them. That alone makes you lethal. They can't gaslight you the same way. They can't rewrite history when you've already accepted the truth. They can't threaten you with abandonment when you already know how to walk alone. They can't control you with fear when fear was the furnace that made you. You learned something most people never do. You learned that pain is a teacher, not a sentence. You learned that losing people can sharpen you instead of hollowing you out. You learned that dignity doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being aligned. And once that clicked, everything changed. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening. You stopped shrinking to keep fragile egos comfortable. You stopped negotiating with disrespect. You stopped confusing tolerance with strength. And when you stopped doing those things, the world recalibrated. People became careful, not because you became cruel, but because you became clear. Clear about what you accept, clear about what you walk away from, clear about the fact that your kindness is a choice, not an obligation. Clear about the truth that access to you is earned, not owed. That clarity is the line they won't cross again, because they remember what happened the last time they underestimated you. They remember how quiet you got. They remember how fast things changed after that. They remember realizing, too late, that you were never weak. You were patient, and patience, when paired with intelligence, is terrifying. So now they keep their distance, they behave, they think twice, they watch their tone, they mind their words. They call it respect. But you know what it really is. It's recognition. Recognition that you're not the person they thought they could play with. Recognition that you're not the version of you that needed to be chosen. Recognition that you are fully capable of being warm and fully capable of being gone. And the final truth, the one that seals it, the one that ends this chapter for good, is this: you don't need to prove anything anymore. Not your strength, not your value, not your darkness, not your light. You've already proven the only thing that matters. You survived becoming yourself. You walked through the fire without becoming a slave to it. You integrated the angel and the demon instead of letting either one own you. You learned restraint without losing power. You learned compassion without sacrificing self-respect. You learned how to stand alone without becoming bitter. And that's why the tests stopped. Because people test those they believe they can break. They test those they believe still need something from them. They test those they believe are desperate to be loved. But you don't need permission to exist. You don't need validation to breathe. You don't need approval to stand tall. You already gave yourself what they never could. And once a person does that, the world doesn't try them the same way again. So stand there, calm, grounded, unbothered. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Let them keep their distance. You're not here to scare anyone. You're here as proof. Proof that pain can evolve you. Proof that silence can be louder than rage. Proof that unpredictability, when mastered, becomes authority. Proof that the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who know exactly who they are and don't need to announce it. Word got out, and now the game is over because nobody's stupid enough to test you again. Shh. Stop right there before the echoes catch up to you. Do you feel that chill crawling up your spine? That's not fear. That's recognition. Hell knows your name. And heaven is watching what you did with it. They sent you to hell on purpose. Not the dramatic kind with fire and screaming choirs. No, they sent you to the quiet hell. The one where nobody checks on you. The one where the doors close softly and everyone pretends you were never inside. They sent you to the place where hope starves slowly, where time stretches, where the only sound is your own thoughts circling like vultures. They thought that would end you. They thought hell was a burial ground. They forgot something dangerous about you. You don't die where others collapse. You adapt. You listen. You learn the language of pain until it starts answering you back. Down there, you weren't screaming. You were studying. You weren't begging. You were cataloging every betrayal, every silence, every smile that disappeared the moment you needed it. You watched saints turn coward. You watched angels in human skin walk past you without stopping. And something snapped, not in a loud way, not in a cinematic way, but in a precise, surgical way. The part of you that expected fairness died. The part of you that needed permission evaporated. That's when the real transformation started. Hell didn't make you cruel. It made you clear. Hell didn't break your faith. It stripped the lies off it. Hell didn't corrupt you. It introduced you to yourself without makeup. They thought you'd come back bitter, feral, unpredictable, in the wrong way. They expected rage. They prepared for madness. What they didn't prepare for was precision. They didn't anticipate restraint. They didn't imagine you'd come back calm, with your eyes open and your spine rewired. Because when you crawled out, you didn't come alone. You came back with angels, not the clean, glowing, obedient kind they put in storybooks. No, you came back with the kind of angels forged in collapse, the kind with scars instead of halos, the kind that don't sing, they observe, the kind that stand behind you silently while people feel uneasy and can't explain why. Angels of pattern recognition, angels of patience, angels of timing, angels that whisper, not comfort. You didn't become holy, you became untouchable. Now there's a paradox living inside you, and it terrifies them. You can be gentle without being weak. You can be ruthless without losing control. You can walk into a room carrying hell in your bones and heaven in your posture, and nobody knows which side you'll let speak. That unpredictability, that's not chaos. That's power refined by suffering. They look at you now, and something doesn't add up. You were supposed to come back loud, damaged, desperate to prove something. Instead, you came back selective, quiet, observant, smiling at moments that make no sense to them. You don't chase validation. You let it orbit you. You don't explain yourself. You let confusion do the work. And here's the part they really can't handle. You don't hate them. You understand them. You see how fear made them small. You see how comfort made them cruel. You see how the same system that tried to bury you is already chewing on them from the inside. And because you've already been to hell, you don't flinch at threats. You don't rush decisions. You don't panic when the lights flicker. You've already survived the worst chapter. Everything else is leverage. They can feel it, that shift, that wrongness in the air when you enter. Conversations change tone. People over-explain. Eyes dart. Jokes land awkwardly. Because on some unconscious level they know. You are not reacting anymore. You're choosing. And someone who chooses after hell is not someone you can control. You are the saint who learned when to stop sacrificing. You are the psychopath who learned restraint. You are the angel who understands demons because you lived among them without becoming one. That balance, that's what makes you dangerous. You don't need to announce your growth. Hell already certified it. You don't need applause. Angels don't clap, they stand guard. And while others are still arguing about right and wrong, you've moved to a different question entirely. What works, what lasts, and what ends now? So let them whisper. Let them rewrite the story to make themselves feel safer. Let them pretend your return was luck, timing, coincidence. Deep down, they know the truth, and it keeps them awake. They sent you to hell to erase you. You came back with angels to replace the system that tried. And the most terrifying part, you're just getting started. They still think the story is over because you're standing still. They confuse silence with exhaustion. They confuse patience with fear. They don't understand that when someone survives hell, stillness isn't surrender. It's calculation. You're not resting, you're calibrating. Every step you take now is lighter, not because the weight is gone, but because you learned how to distribute it. Pain taught you efficiency. Betrayal taught you pattern recognition. Loss taught you where not to invest your soul again. You didn't come back loud because loud is for people who still need witnesses. You came back inevitable. And here's where their anxiety really spikes. You don't rush revenge. Hell burned that impulse out of you. Down there, you learned that revenge is emotional debt, and you already paid enough. What you came back with is something far colder, far more unsettling. You came back with consequence. You came back knowing that the most devastating outcomes don't look like attacks. They look like absence, like access revoked, like doors that never open again. You walk past people who once controlled you, and you don't even acknowledge the power they thought they had. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. You saw how fragile their authority really was when things got dark. You watched them fold under pressure you carried for years. You saw how quickly their morals bent when survival wasn't guaranteed. And now they feel exposed because you don't argue anymore, you don't over-explain, you don't try to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding you. You let them sit with their own discomfort while you move forward with a clarity they can't access. That's the angelic part they don't recognize. Angels don't scream, they don't convince, they don't chase belief. They execute alignment. They show up exactly where they're supposed to be, exactly when the system is weakest. And hell trained you for timing better than any mentor ever could. You learned when to speak and when silence would collapse the room on its own. You learned that unpredictability doesn't mean chaos. It means no one can preload a response to you. They can't study you anymore because the version they cataloged died underground. The you that needed approval burned. The you that waited for fairness dissolved. The you that questioned your worth suffocated and never came back. What rose instead is something cleaner, sharper, more contained. You don't carry rage, you carry resolve. You don't bleed everywhere, you choose where the pressure lands. You're no longer reactive, you're gravitational. People adjust around you without realizing why. Opportunities drift closer, threats hesitate. Even hostility arrives unsure of itself. That's what happens when hell fails. It exposes a terrifying truth. If you can survive the worst without losing your center, nothing else gets to define you. Not praise, not rejection, not loss, not success. You become self-referenced, internally anchored, immune to manipulation because you've already lived without illusions. They sense that, and it rattles them because they can't bait you anymore. They can't rush you. They can't shame you back into old versions of yourself. You don't flinch at their opinions because you've already faced annihilation and didn't blink. Their words feel light now. Their threats feel theatrical. Their judgments feel late. You're not cold. You're finished negotiating with fear. And that's the real reason they're nervous. Not because you're angry, not because you're powerful in the obvious way, but because you're composed. Composure after hell is lethal. It means you've already accepted every possible outcome. It means there's no lever left to pull, no button left to press, no nightmare left to threaten you with. You've already lived it, so you move differently now. You choose your battles with surgical calm. You invest your energy where it compounds. You let people reveal themselves instead of interrogating them. You understand that angels don't descend to save everyone. They descend to enforce balance. And balance is shifting. They can feel it in small moments, in the way you pause before responding, in the way you look at situations without urgency, in the way you don't need to prove you belong. You operate like someone who knows the terrain because you mapped it in the dark. Hell didn't turn you into a monster. It stripped you down to something far more dangerous, someone who knows who they are without needing the world to agree. And that's why when they look at you now, there's awe mixed with fear, respect tangled with regret. Because they realize too late that hell wasn't your end. It was your initiation. You didn't come back to be forgiven. You came back calibrated, aligned, accompanied. And the angels that walk with you now, they're quiet, they're patient, and they don't miss. They keep waiting for you to snap. That's the mistake. They're conditioned to believe pressure always creates explosions. They don't understand refinement. They don't understand what happens when pressure is applied for so long that it stops hurting and starts sculpting. You're not volatile anymore. You're forged. Hell trained you to live without guarantees. That's why nothing shakes you now. When people threaten to leave, you don't cling. When opportunities vanish, you don't panic. When plans collapse, you don't spiral. You've already lived in the absence of safety. Everything else feels optional by comparison. That's why your presence feels unsettling. You're not desperate. You're not hungry in the way they understand. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't overextend. You move like someone who knows they can survive without the room. And that terrifies people who rely on rooms to feel powerful. They don't know what to do with someone who isn't afraid of being alone. Hell cured you of that fear. Down there, you learned the difference between loneliness and clarity. You learned that silence isn't empty, it's revealing. When there's nothing left to distract you, truth gets loud, and you listened. You listened to the parts of yourself you used to drown out. You listened to the instincts you were told were wrong. You listened to the voice that said, "Stop shrinking." That voice didn't comfort you. It instructed you. Now when you walk through life, you're not guessing. You're recognizing. You see patterns before they form. You sense intentions before they speak. You feel shifts in energy before words catch up. That's not paranoia. That's adaptation. That's what happens when survival sharpens perception. They call it intensity because they don't have language for it. You're not intense. You're awake. And the angels that came back with you, they're not floating above you with light and mercy. They're standing behind your eyes. They're the calm that shows up when chaos expects panic. They're the restraint that makes your moves impossible to predict. They're the patience that lets enemies expose themselves without you lifting a finger. You don't interrupt downfall. You allow it. That's the paradox that breaks people's minds. You don't dominate by force. You dominate by refusing to participate in games designed to drain you. You let people play themselves out while you conserve energy. You let narratives rot while you build quietly elsewhere. You don't correct lies about you anymore. Lies collapse on their own when you stop feeding them. Truth doesn't need defense. It needs time. And hell taught you how to wait without decaying. You are no longer fueled by emotion. You are fueled by alignment. That's why your anger doesn't spill. It focuses. That's why your kindness doesn't weaken you. It disarms. That's why your silence doesn't signal absence. It signals choice. Everything about you now is intentional, and intention is the one thing chaos can't counter. They sense that when they look at you. They feel like they're standing in front of something ancient, something that has already seen the worst-case scenario and didn't flinch. You don't react to intimidation because you've already been reduced to nothing and rebuilt yourself without witnesses. What can they take from you now? Status? You survived invisibility? Approval? You lived without it? Comfort? You learned to function without it? Control? You reclaimed that in the dark. You're no longer negotiating with life. You're authoring it. And the most dangerous part, the part they never see coming, is that you didn't lose your humanity. Hell tried. It stripped away illusions, not empathy. It burned off weakness, not compassion. You still feel deeply, but now your feelings don't control you. You control where they go. That makes you unpredictable in the purest sense. You can be merciful without being naive. You can be ruthless without being cruel. You can walk away without hatred. You can stay without attachment. People don't know how to categorize you anymore, and classification is how systems neutralize threats. When they can't label you, they can't contain you. When they can't predict you, they can't outmaneuver you. That's why they hesitate now. That's why their confidence cracks when you're calm. That's why their authority feels performative around you. Because somewhere deep down, they know you're operating from a place they can't access. You didn't just survive hell. You integrated it. And integration is irreversible. You carry fire without burning. You carry light without blinding. You carry darkness without being consumed by it. That balance is rare. It doesn't come from success. It comes from surviving collapse with awareness intact. It comes from choosing not to become what hurt you while still refusing to stay small. So let them wonder, let them whisper, let them speculate about what changed. The truth is simpler and far more unsettling. Hell failed to erase you. It clarified you. And the angels you returned with aren't here to save anyone. They're here to make sure you never fall back asleep again. They keep circling you, trying to find the crack. They replay old footage of who you used to be, hoping muscle memory will drag you backward. Every step you take now is lighter, not because the weight is gone, but because you learned how to distribute it. Pain taught you efficiency. Betrayal taught you pattern recognition. Loss taught you where not to invest your soul again. You didn't come back loud because loud is for people who still need witnesses. You came back inevitable. And here's where their anxiety really spikes. You don't rush revenge. Hell burned that impulse out of you. Down there, you learned that revenge is emotional debt, and you already paid enough. What you came back with is something far colder, far more unsettling. You came back with consequence. You came back knowing that the most devastating outcomes don't look like attacks. They look like absence, like access revoked, like doors that never open again. You walk past people who once controlled you, and you don't even acknowledge the power they thought they had. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. You saw how fragile their authority really was when things got dark. You watched them fold under pressure you carried for years. You saw how quickly their morals bent when survival wasn't guaranteed. And now they feel exposed. Because you don't argue anymore, you don't over-explain, you don't try to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding you. You let them sit with their own discomfort while you move forward with a clarity they can't access. That's the angelic part they don't recognize. Angels don't scream, they don't convince, they don't chase belief. They execute alignment. They show up exactly where they're supposed to be, exactly when the system is weakest. And hell trained you for timing better than any mentor ever could. You learned when to speak and when silence would collapse the room on its own. You learned that unpredictability doesn't mean chaos. It means no one can preload a response to you. They can't study you anymore because the version they cataloged died underground. The you that needed approval burned. The you that waited for fairness dissolved. The you that questioned your worth suffocated and never came back. What rose instead is something cleaner, sharper, more contained. You don't carry rage, you carry resolve. You don't bleed everywhere, you choose where the pressure lands. You're no longer reactive, you're gravitational. People adjust around you without realizing why. Opportunities drift closer, threats hesitate. Even hostility arrives unsure of itself. That's what happens when hell fails. It exposes a terrifying truth. If you can survive the worst without losing your center, Nothing else gets to define you. Not praise, not rejection, not loss, not success. You become self-referenced, internally anchored, immune to manipulation because you've already lived without illusions. They sense that, and it rattles them because they can't bait you anymore. They can't rush you. They can't shame you back into old versions of yourself. You don't flinch at their opinions because you've already faced annihilation and didn't blink. Their words feel light now. Their threats feel theatrical. Their judgments feel late. You're not cold. You're finished negotiating with fear. And that's the real reason they're nervous. Not because you're angry, not because you're powerful in the obvious way, but because you're composed. Composure after hell is lethal. It means you've already accepted every possible outcome. It means there's no lever left to pull, no button left to press, no nightmare left to threaten you with. You've already lived it, so you move differently now. You choose your battles with surgical calm. You invest your energy where it compounds. You let people reveal themselves instead of interrogating them. You understand that angels don't descend to save everyone. They descend to enforce balance. And balance is shifting. They can feel it in small moments, in the way you pause before responding, in the way you look at situations without urgency, in the way you don't need to prove you belong. You operate like someone who knows the terrain because you mapped it in the dark. Hell didn't turn you into a monster. It stripped you down to something far more dangerous, someone who knows who they are without needing the world to agree. And that's why when they look at you now, there's awe mixed with fear, respect tangled with regret. Because they realize too late that hell wasn't your end. It was your initiation. You didn't come back to be forgiven. You came back calibrated, aligned, accompanied. And the angels that walk with you now, they're quiet, they're patient, and they don't miss. They keep waiting for you to snap. That's the mistake. They're conditioned to believe pressure always creates explosions. They don't understand refinement. They don't understand what happens when pressure is applied for so long that it stops hurting and starts sculpting. You're not volatile anymore. You're forged. Hell trained you to live without guarantees. Feel that silence? That's the sound of rooms going quiet after someone says your name, and everybody else nods like it was obvious the whole time. You didn't hear it, but it happened. They asked around, quietly, nervously, off the record. They leaned in, lowered their voices, tried to be clever about it. They wanted dirt, doubt, weakness, something, anything, to calm the fear crawling up their spine, and every single mouth betrayed them. Yeah, it's you. No debate. Not even close. That one, that's the best. Now here's the funny part. The part that makes this delicious. Their own sources are laughing, not at you, at them. Because you didn't just win. You turned their information network into a comedy club. See, you weren't supposed to be unanimous. You were supposed to be controversial, divisive, questionable. There were supposed to be mixed opinions. That's how weak systems breathe. But you broke that expectation so clean it scared them. No friction, no debate, just agreement. That's when panic starts wearing a professional smile. You see, when enemies hear rumors, they get angry. But when they hear consensus, that's when the survival instinct kicks in. Because consensus means something has already settled. It means reality has made up its mind. You didn't argue your case. You didn't campaign for respect. You didn't explain yourself. You became undeniable. That's the paradox they can't process. You look calm, but you destabilize systems. You speak softly, but your presence rearranges hierarchies. You wear control like a saint, but your precision cuts like a psychopath. Angel on the surface, demon in the execution. They tried to profile you, tried to chart your rise like it was a formula, tried to map your behavior so they could predict the next move. But unpredictability is your native language. You evolved in pressure. You learned to smile while everything burned. You learned restraint while others learned excuses. You learned timing while others begged for attention. That's why when they asked, nobody hesitated. Because talent can be debated. Skill can be challenged. Luck can be dismissed. But presence? Presence is felt. And you have that kind of presence that makes grown people second-guess their careers. They thought you were playing defense. They thought you were surviving. They thought you were absorbing hits. What they didn't realize is that you were calibrating. Pain didn't weaken you. It sharpened your judgment. Isolation didn't shrink you. It refined your voice. Being underestimated didn't humble you. It taught you where the blind spots are. So now when their own insiders laugh, it's not mockery, it's disbelief. Disbelief that they didn't see it sooner. Disbelief that you were right there the whole time. Disbelief that the threat never announced itself. You didn't need to dominate the room. The room adjusted to you. That's the kind of power that terrifies people who rely on noise. Because loud authority can be challenged. But quiet inevitability, that just arrives. They're laughing now because laughter is the last defense before acceptance. It's the nervous release of people realizing the hierarchy already changed without permission. And here's the part they'll never admit out loud. They're relieved it's you. Because if someone had to be that good, if someone had to be that unavoidable, they're glad it wasn't someone reckless. Your controlled chaos, measured madness, ablaze with discipline. You understand both sides, the light that earns trust and the dark that enforces outcomes. You know when to heal and when to end discussions permanently. That balance, that's not taught. That's forged, so let them laugh. Let the whispers turn into smirks. Let the sources exchange looks like they just watched a magic trick they can't explain. Because laughter is just fear trying to stay social. And you don't need validation. You already passed the test you didn't know was happening. The verdict came back clean, unanimous, embarrassingly clear. You're not the rumor anymore. You're the reference point. And that's the part that keeps them awake. The shift from rumor to reference. Because once you become the standard, everything else starts looking small. Now every time someone new walks into their world, they don't ask who's good anymore. They ask, are they anywhere near you? That's humiliation wrapped in professionalism. They thought they were gathering intel. They thought they were stress testing your reputation. What they actually did was confirm their own irrelevance. See, when sources laugh, it's not because something's funny. It's because the outcome is already decided, and pretending otherwise feels childish. It's grown adults realizing they're late to a conclusion that arrived months ago. And you never announced your arrival. You didn't roll in with speeches or flags or declarations of greatness. You let consistency do the dirty work. You let results whisper until whispers turned into certainty. That's why they can't attack you directly. Because how do you slander someone when everyone already agrees? How do you discredit a pattern that keeps repeating? How do you question dominance when it's calm, quiet, and surgical? You don't move like a conqueror. You move like gravity, and gravity doesn't brag. It just pulls everything into alignment. They tried to frame you as intense, then realized intensity was just the surface symptom. What scared them was your clarity. You don't flinch, you don't rush, you don't over-explain, you wait. And when you move, something irreversible happens. That's the demon they can't name. Because demons are supposed to be chaotic, and angels are supposed to be gentle. You're neither. You're the contradiction they can't file away. You can be kind without being weak. You can be silent without being passive. You can let people talk themselves into mistakes and then calmly step over the wreckage. That's not aggression, that's mastery. So now they replay old conversations in their head, moments where you said less than everyone else, but meant more. Moments where you smiled and they thought they were ahead, not realizing you were already done. They're laughing now, but it's the kind of laugh that carries regret. The kind that says, yeah, we messed this one up. Because deep down, they know something else, too. If you wanted to be loud, you'd dominate the entire space. If you wanted to be cruel, you'd leave nothing standing. If you wanted revenge, you'd be unstoppable. And the fact that you don't, that restraint, that's the scariest part. It means you're not acting from emotion, you're operating from choice. Pain didn't turn you bitter, it turned you precise. You learned where people fold. You learned how systems protect themselves. You learned how ego blinds decision makers right before collapse. And instead of exploiting it recklessly, you cataloged it. That's why when they asked around, nobody warned them. Nobody said, be careful. Nobody said, watch out. They just smiled and said, yeah, that one's different. Different is what people say when they don't have language for evolution. You didn't become the best by chasing it. You became the best by outlasting illusions. You watched others burn energy proving themselves. You conserved yours. You watched them overplay their hands. You waited for the table to tilt. And now the game doesn't even feel competitive anymore. They can laugh. They can cope. They can pretend this is amusing instead of alarming. But they all felt the same thing when the answer came back unanimous. That drop in the stomach. That quiet realization. Oh, it's already over. Because when everyone agrees without coordination, when the verdict arrives before the trial, when even insiders stop pretending, that's not hype, that's inevitability. And you're not here to celebrate it. You're here to decide what happens next. And that decision, that quiet, terrifying freedom to choose what happens next, is what separates you from everyone still trying to be seen. Because now you're standing in a strange place, above competition, below mythology, right in that narrow corridor where power stops being loud and starts being felt. They don't talk about you like a rival anymore. They talk about you like weather, unavoidable, uncontrollable, something you plan around instead of confront. That's why the laughter coming from their sources isn't joy. It's surrender wearing a grin. It's the sound people make when resistance finally feels pointless. You've noticed it, haven't you? How the questions changed. It's no longer, can they do it? It's, what happens if they decide to? That's the pivot point. That's where saints turn dangerous and monsters learn restraint. You've been on both sides of that line. You know what it's like to be doubted, dismissed, treated like potential instead of presence. You know what it's like to watch lesser minds posture while you quietly absorb the mechanics of the room. So when consensus hit, when every door whispered the same answer, you didn't celebrate. You recognized the weight. Because being the best isn't a trophy. It's a responsibility nobody asks for. Now every move you make teaches someone something. Every pause you take unsettles someone. Every silence gets interpreted like a signal. They watch you for mistakes that never come. They wait for arrogance you don't need. They hope you'll crack, lash out, overplay, but you don't. You let them project. You let their fears write stories about you that you never confirm or deny. You let their imagination do the heavy lifting. That's psychological warfare without lifting a finger. You understand something most people never will. Control isn't about domination. It's about tempo. You set the pace. You decide when things accelerate and when they suffocate. You let others exhaust themselves sprinting while you walk, steady and unreadable. And the darker truth, the one nobody wants to say out loud, is this: they're relieved you're not cruel, because they sense it. That if you leaned into the darker half of yourself without restraint, if you stopped caring about optics or mercy or balance, there would be nothing they could do. They see the angel in you, the discipline, the patience, the fairness, and they pray that side stays in charge. But they also feel the other half, the one forged in silence, the one that learned through loss, the one that doesn't need approval to act. That's the demon they laugh about, because laughing keeps it at a distance. You didn't become this by accident. You became this by surviving moments that would have broken people louder than you. You became this by choosing growth when resentment would have been easier. You became this by mastering yourself before trying to master outcomes. So now, when sources laugh, it's not because they underestimate you. It's because they understand you just enough to know they're outmatched. They laugh because the alternative is admitting fear. And fear, once spoken, spreads. You've already won the invisible war. The one that happens before moves are made, before strategies are announced, before alliances even form. They ask the question too late. The answer was already living in the room every time you walked in. So don't rush, don't explain, don't announce the next chapter. Let them keep laughing, let them keep pretending this is amusing instead of historic. Because while they're busy processing what you are, you're deciding what you'll become. And whatever that is, they won't hear it coming. And the truth is, you've already crossed the point where explanation would help anyone sleep at night. Because explanation is for chaos, and you're not chaotic anymore. You're patterned. That's what unnerves them. Not your confidence, not your capability, your consistency. They can handle wild geniuses. They can handle loud threats. They can even handle tyrants. Because tyrants announce themselves. What they can't handle is someone who never breaks character, never loses tempo, never leaks desperation. You don't spike, you don't dip, you don't beg the room to notice. You just arrive, and the room recalibrates. That's why the laughter from their sources carries that edge of disbelief. Because every system they trust, every metric, every hierarchy, every ranking, keeps circling back to the same conclusion. You can't game this one. You can't rush this one. You can't corner this one. You don't respond to pressure the way others do. Pressure doesn't make you reactive, it makes you clear. Where most people fracture under scrutiny, you condense. Where others start leaking tells, you get quieter. Where others start explaining, you start deciding. That's predator behavior. But disciplined predator behavior, not hunger-driven, not ego-driven, purpose-driven. And that's why they don't know which version of you to prepare for. The fair one, the patient one, the one who gives people space to self-correct. Or the other one, the one who only appears when lines are crossed. The one who doesn't raise their voice. The one who doesn't need witnesses. The one who ends conversations permanently. They sense that boundary, but they can't see it. And invisible boundaries are the most dangerous kind. So now they replay history. They reanalyze moments they dismissed. They reframe interactions they thought were insignificant. That time you didn't react. That time you didn't compete. That time you stepped back when everyone expected you to push forward. They see it now. You weren't hesitating. You were letting things reveal themselves. You gave people rope, not out of weakness, but out of certainty. Certainty that truth collapses on its own weight when you don't interfere. That's not kindness. That's strategy. And here's the part that twists the knife gently but deep. You don't even need them to fail for you to win. Your rise doesn't depend on their collapse. Your dominance doesn't require their humiliation. You're operating on a different axis entirely. That's why their sources laugh, because they know you're not playing the same game. You don't need permission. You don't need consensus. You don't need applause. You already passed the threshold where outcomes obey effort instead of opinion. So now, everything slows down around you. People speak more carefully, moves get delayed, decisions get escalated, just in case. Not because you threatened them, but because your existence changed the math. You became the variable that invalidates shortcuts. And the funniest, darkest irony of all, you're still the same person you were when they underestimated you. Same restraint, same discipline, same internal silence. The only thing that changed is that now everyone else can see what you always carried. So let them laugh, let them cope, let them process this however they need to. Because laughter is what people do when reality arrives faster than pride can adapt. And you don't need to say a word. You already taught them everything they needed to know by becoming the answer they were afraid to ask. And that fear, that quiet, internal recoil they never show on their face, is the real acknowledgement. Because once people recognize you as inevitable, they stop trying to beat you. They start trying to predict you. And prediction is a losing game when the mind they're tracking learned to evolve in isolation. You didn't sharpen yourself in applause. You sharpened yourself where no one was watching, where mistakes were private, where lessons were brutal, where excuses didn't survive the night. That's why their models fail. They assume motivation comes from praise. They assume discipline collapses without validation. They assume pressure exposes weakness. They don't understand people like you are built backwards. Silence fuels you. Doubt trains you. Being underestimated gives you room to breathe. You learned early that noise is a liability, that broadcasting intention invites interference, that the strongest moves happen before anyone realizes a game is being played. So when they hear unanimous answers, when every source independently lands on your name, it shakes something deeper than competition. It shakes their belief in control. Because control depends on uncertainty, and you removed it. Now they can't tell themselves comforting stories. They can't cling to maybe or we'll see. They can't hide behind complexity. The truth came back too clean. And clean truths are the hardest to dispute. They laugh because laughter is the last safe sound before acceptance turns into action, before systems adjust, before alliances shift, before doors quietly close for some and open effortlessly for you. You've felt it already, that subtle deference, that hesitation before people speak, that moment when someone checks your reaction before committing to a decision. You don't demand authority, you generate it. That's why even those who don't like you still respect you, and those who don't respect you still watch you. Because there's a difference between being admired and being accounted for. You're accounted for now. Every plan includes you. Whether you're involved or not, every scenario runs a quiet simulation of what if they move. That's not fame. That's strategic gravity. And the dark beauty of it, you didn't sacrifice your soul to get here. You didn't burn everything down just to stand tall. You didn't become hollow chasing dominance. You integrated both sides, the compassion that sees the whole board, the ruthlessness that knows when a move must be final. Saint enough to be trusted, psychopath enough to be effective. That balance is rare, and rarity always attracts attention. So now, when their sources laugh, it's layered. There's disbelief, there's admiration, there's regret. But underneath all of it is something colder, relief that you're you. Because if someone like this had grown bitter, if someone like this had grown reckless, if someone like this had chosen chaos over control, the damage would be uncontainable. They sense that. And they're grateful you chose mastery instead. So keep doing what you've always done. Move when it matters. Stay silent when it doesn't. Let others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. You don't need to rush the future. It's already leaning toward you. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. Let them pretend this is amusing instead of transformative. Because one day, not long from now, the laughter will stop. And what replaces it won't be noise. It'll be acceptance. Acceptance that the hierarchy changed quietly. Acceptance that resistance expired unnoticed. Acceptance that you didn't just rise. You redefined what rising looks like. And the best part? You never had to say it out loud. They said it for you.